My name is Mila Alayubi. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Strategic Partnerships Director for BISC. We just watched a video about what the Declaration of Cooperation is, why it was created, and how we encourage our partners to use it in their movement building work. Now we're going to hear exactly how both funders and practitioners are using the DOC to re-examine and redefine what winning means. So Estevan and Prentice, during our discussion, I ask that you limit your answers to 1 to 2 minutes as I rotate between the two of you. And let's go ahead and just kick this off with introducing yourselves and your organizations and talk to us a little bit about your involvement to date with examine and redefine what winning means. So Estevan and Prentice. And why you think this is an important resource. Estevan, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Mila, and to all of BISC for putting this together. Really happy to be able to be involved. So my name is Estevan Munoz Howard. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a senior program officer with the Piper Fund. I live in Seattle, but our work is national. And I've been really excited to be able to be a part of the DOC with BISC for the last, I think, 3 years. This first came up, I think, at Road Ahead convening, I believe a few years ago. They all sort of blend together after a while, but have been involved for the last few years. And I first became plugged into this particular concept when a colleague, Jesse Beeson from Northwest Health Foundation, mentioned this idea of a collective bargaining agreement for coalitions, for organizers to be able to use. And this idea just kind of stuck, and it sat there for a while. And then over the last few years, through the 2030 roadmap process, we have been involved in various work groups that have tried to look at some of the challenges that ballot initiatives face across the country. And over time, we realized that the ideas that were coming up kept on sort of coming back to this concept of a collective bargaining agreement. And eventually that sort of transformed into the document, the tool that has been created today, the Declaration of Cooperation. And what I really appreciate about this tool is that I feel like it forces us to move beyond just the value statement that everyone can sort of generally agree to, that we all believe in justice and equity, and forces us to be really specific about what that means, what that looks like in practice. Because I think it's too easy for folks to agree on the general terms, but not interrogate how standard practice, how conventional wisdom, how sort of the systems that have already been set up are reinforcing and exacerbating disparities that exist in access to power and resources. And so I think what it really stands out to me is the opportunity that the Declaration of Cooperation provides for us to really be specific about what we mean when we talk about these values, and then in turn hold ourselves more accountable to a set of practices that actually make our work more sustainable and better overall. I'll leave it there.
Very well said, Estevan. Prentice, how about you?
Yeah, thank you all, BISC, for inviting me. My name is Prentice Haney. I am the co-executive director of the Ohio Organizing Collaborative. We are a statewide people-powered organization building power for everyday Ohioans, organizing young people, workers, people of faith, and also formerly incarcerated individuals for our racial and economic justice in our state. What I really love about this conversation, I'm so glad I'm a part of it, is that the Declaration of Cooperation, when we started getting involved in BISC about 3 or 4 years ago, just revolutionized the sort of process it takes to actually operationalize alignment. Yesterday, during the conference, when I think Marcia said, going bold takes time. And I think that is so true. And when you couple going bold, taking time with, the sort of hard work it takes to align each other, the Declaration of Cooperation is how you operationalize bold long-term change with alignment the alignment that it takes to actually operationalize it. And so part of why I think that the DOC is so critical for especially grassroots groups is that, yes, the ballot initiative process is one that anyone can engage in, but it was not created to be equal. It was not created for everyone to be able to engage in it. And even when progressives started using direct democracy as a path to win progressive policies, not everyone could be at that table. And so the Declaration of Cooperation changes that dynamic where state groups, independent groups, grassroots groups, labor unions funders can work together around an aligned plan and then have concrete details. I like how you said a collective bargaining agreement, concrete details about how we operationalize it. And it actually helps us get clear about the choices that we need to make together, get clear about our expertise, and who needs to own those expertise. And then when resources come down, the resources are connected to what we collectively agreed that we're going to do, and that we can follow those practices together. So I'm just really thankful for BISC and then all the practitioners that helped develop this piece.
You guys are fantastic. So, Prentice, you may have a few ballot measure campaigns on your hands in the next couple of years. Why is a tool like this specifically helpful for you, for the Ohio Organizing Collaborative, and for Ohio in general? How do you intend to use it?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is that I could tell you how it's been hard without it. When we decided to go to the ballot in 2018 around sentencing reform, we didn't have the DOC, we had done some work to build alignment, and we had done a whole bunch of work to put a really massive ballot, a massive issue on the ballot. However, because there was not clear commitments about how we could engage with each other when things got hard, as they always do, there was not a clear path about how we actually support each other and fight for the initiative. I'm not going to say that's the reason why we didn't win, but I can tell you that when you don't actually know the path for how to engage with people who are supposed to be on your side, it's a very lonely place. And so, since then, we've actually been focused so intently about building out the alignment that we need so that we can get to a place where we can build DOCs. Last cycle, we actually were fighting to put AVR and SDR on the ballot. And one of the first things we were able to do was talk about building out a DOC and how grassroots groups and the ACLU and other folks could work together to figure out the policy, the steering committee, how we decide on vendors. And even though that wasn't able to go to the ballot because of COVID, our sort of working relationship was one where we had shared power and we were able to bring our different expertise to the table. And so now moving forward over the next 10 years, there's a number of different fights where we're poised as state anchors to bring this sort of process to the table around minimum wage. We're already starting conversations around the DOC and how we want to set up the steering committee, how we want to think about the pre-planning. We're in conversations around educational funding ballot initiative right now. And we're already meeting literally bi-weekly with our education labor unions in the state about alignment, about how we work together, about how we operationalize this work. And then there are other fights that can come down around childcare, around paid sick leave. And so I would say that the DOC is only as powerful as the people who actually buy in, and then the grassroots groups who do the hard work of building the alignment with funders to see why this is a valuable tool to bring us together.
All right. And then Esteban, we've talked a lot about how the practitioners are using this. Could you give us a little more of your sense of how you see funders using this resource, and how do you as a funder see organizations you work with using the DOC? Yeah.
I think, well, first of all, there are a lot of reasons why funders might not automatically want to get behind a tool like this, because as it currently stands, funders hold a lot of power in these spaces. That at the end of the day, if you control the resources, then you have a lot of sway over which policies are being developed, over what practices are being implemented, around what the funding can actually be used for. Is this going to be for research, or is it only for the actual campaign? Getting out the vote. Are you going to support early policy development before it's really even clear that there is a real path here? And so I think there are a lot of reasons why funders, if they are fully bought into sort of the status quo and the way things have been done in the past, wouldn't want to actually plug in. But what I think is really exciting about this is that, again, coming back to this idea of accountability, I think this is a tool that allows us to hold accountable actors who are historically unaccountable. And funders are generally going to be accountable to their boards, which we all know tend to be whiter and wealthier than the communities that they're ostensibly working to serve. And so what I think is particularly exciting is that progressive funders that are already aligned with this orientation, this approach of wanting to think about who's at the table, wanting to integrate some of those systems and practices, wanting to make the work more sustainable and effective over the long term, that are really focused on power building, I think will be really drawn to this sort of a tool, because it is a way to really shift how work is done around that orientation. So really looking at those opportunities for alignment, like Prentice said, to be able to get a core group of funders that can really support this, support implementation, adaptation, and get this utilized across the board. I think once there is a critical mass of folks who are using this, then we'll be able to make a stronger case for some of those funders who are a little bit more on the outside. Because if there's anything that funders care about, is legacy, right? It's as culture shifts, then they're not going to want to be the ones who are sort of seen as the ones that didn't evolve or were sort of operating on the outside. And so if we see that states are developing the infrastructure that actually centers impacted communities and shifts how power is held, then in order for those funders to be able to have an impact in that space, they're going to have to at least be clear about what they will and won't commit to. What are those practices that they can agree to, and what maybe if they can't completely come on board, then what are those ones that they're hung up on? And at least we can be clear about that from the beginning, so that then states and coalitions can decide, is that okay? Is that going to work for us? And if not, what are we going to do about it? But it's not going to work for us to continue as it's been and allow funders to continue to hold that power throughout the process, and then put the actual policy effort in a really difficult position down the line when they decide to say, you know what, actually this isn't going the way we want, we're going to pull our money, and then the campaign falls apart. We just need that clarity up front, which can then allow us to make clear decisions about how we proceed collectively. And one more thing I'll say is that I think by doing this, we can also move away from the transactional nature of a lot of these sorts of efforts. If these campaigns are driven by national funders, then the work tends to be more focused on getting a particular policy passed in a swing state, or there's sort of this national sort of lens that's being used of where is most sort of politically meaningful. It's not really about building power. It's not about multi-year commitments to reform. It's not focusing on building that infrastructure that's needed for communities to actually shift what's actually possible on the horizon. So I think there are going to be some questions around how to get sort of the broader set of funders involved, but I think progressive funders, ones who are already aligned, this is your opportunity to really plug in and make this a reality, and then we can collectively bring everyone else along.
Okay, so we have about 2 minutes left, and so I'm going to combine some questions. And the question is, what are some of the challenges you foresee happening trying to use this tool? And what are some of the resources that coalitions will need to be able to mitigate some of those challenges? We're going to start with Prentice.
I'll be quick. We say power concedes nothing without a demand. The DOC is that demand to actually create a space for more people to come into the conversation. The biggest challenge is that there's a power differential between grassroots groups, funders, and other sort of progressive institutions. And so making the demand that we need to create equal footing in the space is the first thing you need to do. And I think the other piece is really BISC. BISC has been instrumental in helping to break down those barriers in state, who can talk across multiple different aisles and get multiple people in the room. So having those trusted national partners and also making sure you're building alignment in your state, and power concedes nothing without a demand.
I would agree with all of that. I would also add that I think one of the challenges or the blocks that we could potentially see is that, the urgency of the moment. That it is always harder to get folks to step back and think about how we're setting up a campaign and how we're building a coalition when we know that it needs to happen now, and there's funding here, and there's an urgent need. And so really getting people to see the opportunity in this tool, to actually want to give it the time and the energy to build it out and make it really work. And I think in order to do that, we need funding, we need BISC, we need more resources to make this to build this out. And I think organizations are going to need some resources to be able to just dedicate staff time and to mentorship and training and support.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here on this panel. Fabulous insight. I also want to lift up that, urgency is part of white supremacy culture. And it is one of the biggest reasons that we suffer the trauma that comes with the urgency, with the gaslighting and then the scapegoating. And so the more we can plan ahead of time and build out multi-cycle campaigns, through this tool, the better we are in keeping ourselves, not re-traumatized. So anyways, with that, I would like to go ahead and just throw it back to our MCs, Chris and Alex, and, enjoy the rest of our program.
Wow, what excellent conversations we got to experience today, Chris. For me, I'll just share a few of my reflections because there was so much to grab onto. A connecting thread throughout each of the sessions, including Representative Jayapal's remarks, were that we are rebuilding the next 10 years, and we are injecting ourselves into the DNA of a new democracy. And that we are building the mechanisms by which we can do that through co-governance, as Maurice Mitchell was talking about, through democracy in daily practice. I love that, as Jesse said that. Mm-hmm. And then being able to bring, as Karina was saying, the conversations directly from the people into governing through the people's petition, and what they are doing with changing the charter is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, there was so much brilliance. I'm not going to share too much because my head is spinning right now, but I just want to thank Esteban, as a funder, being vulnerable, and just, calling out that sometimes often funders are part of the challenge that we have, and we need more funders to be honest with us about what is possible and help us, dismantle some of the systems that, like we've said the last 2 days, were not built for us. So, all I want to do is just thank again our sponsors, our partners, and I want to just give a real quick shout out to the BISC Inc. and Foundation board members, many of who've been panelists, and I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for having my back as we've worked with this incredible team that I have at BISC to transform this organization in the ballot measure space.
So let's get into part 2 of today's programming, where we will look at a little bit more into the future, the brilliance that is needed to build the world our people deserve, from how we learn from our losses to ballot measures, to how funders should and are building with us to reimagine governance and the future of ballot measures. We have a great lineup ahead. First is another performance from Muande Katwiwa. Enjoy.
Why do we do what we do? How do we become what we become? Who inspires us to be ourselves? Inspiration has never been held by human hands, but it occupies minds, travels down the spine, and fills a whole body with purpose, with passion, with progress, with a desire to do more, with the belief that we can and already have and certainly will do more. History has shown us that nothing inspires change more than the brilliance of belief, belief in self, in humanity, in being better than we've been and seen and been shown, in chasing the light until we become it. History shows us that the darkest moments of our past become mere shadows when held against the collective light of the brilliance it inspired us to overcome. See, everything grows, but in what direction? With what intentions? When we humans are a garden of experiences, how do we choose to grow? What will we choose to bloom? Do we sunflower ourselves closer to the light or choke the life and light around us like a weed? 2, this is America. This is America. This is America. This is America. And there are many Americas, beyond North and South, beyond the borders the world has drawn and the ones man made alongside them. There are many Americas, and most of them are dreams deferred or not yet dared to be dreamed yet. And to be honest, most of them have nothing to do with dreams. They're realities that are instead lived alone, but can only be overcome together. Fact, 100 years ago, this room would not have been possible. It is only so because people believed it, because their belief inspired others to find truth and possibility, because this inspiration grew into a new nation that people tended to until it bloomed new realities, realities that we, constant gardeners, must continue to prune, get rid of the decay of fear difference to make space for understanding. Fact, 100 years from now, we won't know what is possible unless we lay the foundations today and tomorrow and the next day and the next day, until our brilliance accumulates into our dreams, until our dreams have birthed new realities that our children and their children and their children would tend to, until they grow beyond what we could even dream. So find your lane and stay in it. Do your work and own it. And never forget, you aren't the first, the second, or the third to try, to fail, or to succeed. And you don't need to be.